some of it is, okay, so what we're looking for with sellers is distress, but we're looking for a combination often of seller distress and property distress. So when we have seller distress, might be they don't have the money to take care of it. There's kind of a bit of a hoarding issue. Maybe someone passed away in the family and they inherited it, or there's emotional attachment to things in the house. That might be seller distress. The other side of it is property distress, where obviously it's full of stuff. The roof's been leaking for years. The dog's been doing their business on the floor, or it's just, they've been smoking in the house, or it's original to 1965 and they've never changed the carpet.
All right, Luc Boiron, how are you doing, my friend? Good to see you.
Thanks so much for having me, Gary.
Yeah, listen, I can't believe this is the first time that we're actually sitting down and doing a podcast together. I mean, we've obviously known about each other for a very long time. You've done some incredible things, and now you're living up in Ottawa with your family, so that's exciting and cool.
Yeah. It was a move for a quieter life. Toronto,
is that what it was?
And the traffic, to be honest. Toronto traffic just keeps getting worse, and it's like, I don't need this. I mean, most of what we do in real estate, a lot of it can be done remotely nowadays. So I don't need to be so close to all the action, but it's not a bad drive into the city. And here, I kind of live in a rural area, but I'm 30 minutes to downtown Ottawa. So it kind of gives me a bit of both worlds. And right now with a young daughter, it's a good thing for life right now.
Yeah, it is a good thing. I know when I was younger as well, too, we lived at Jane and Finch. And then my parents saw what was happening. This is obviously back in the 70s. It was before it kind of got real bad, but it was getting bad. And then they moved to Oshawa, and then we moved to Curtis and Bowmanville. I'm like, why are we out here? This is when it wasn't cool to live in Curtis and Bowmanville. But you know what? When I look back at it now, I'm like, it really kind of shaped the person who I am today. And, but now with technology, it definitely makes things a lot easier. And, I went to the baseball game last night. I'm coming home 6 p.m., Luke, 6 p.m. And it's traffic jam in Durham region, bumper to bumper I'm stuck in it for 40 minutes. I'm like, Sunday at 6, 7 o'clock p.m. It's wild.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. It's, we weren't sure about the move to Ottawa, but we, as part of, in our wholesale business, we'd actually gotten a house under contract kind of on 3 acres on the outskirts of Ottawa. And we went to go see it, and we're like, I don't know if we want to do this. And so we're driving back from Ottawa back to Toronto, and we hit traffic in Bowmanville. This was probably a Sunday night as well. We hit traffic in Bowmanville, and we're like, we got to go.
I know. Even going downtown Toronto, I love the city, but I don't think I can live down there. That's just my own personal. I think. And
I lived down there for a few years. It was nice, especially when you're younger. It's a nice place to live. And actually, my first property I ever bought was at Jane and Finch.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we dive into your first property? That's a great segue into your story, Luc. Jane and Finch. Why there?
Affordability. I went to York. I actually ended up going to York for 8 years, York University. So I guess people don't know, I did an undergrad in business, and then I did a law degree and a joint program with an MBA. So I got licensed as a lawyer. But when I was 18, so we talked a little ahead of time, Gary, I went to China, straight out of high school. I was 16, saved up some money working in China, teaching English. I came back, had always wanted to get into real estate. And I went to Jane and Finch. My dad was a realtor at the time. Even though he did commercial, he showed me around, showed me houses. I remember getting one under contract near Jane and Finch because my thought was I could, it was close enough to York. I could get classmates to live with me and rent rooms. That didn't really happen because people found it a little too far to get to York from Jane and Finch. I got one house under contract, and then we found a bunch of mold in the attic. So we backed out of that one after the inspection. But then I found another one, $302,000 for a nice 1965 build bungalow with a steel roof. Good size square footage too. And 3-bedroom bungalow, 1.5 baths. I ended up not recommending this for everyone. I ended up turning it into a 10-bedroom rooming house over a period of 2 years.
Wow.
I kind of hired a contractor to work with me, by the hour, ran out of money. I ended up working for the contractor over my summers to earn money to buy materials and then work on my own house. So I eventually, turned this into a 10-bedroom rooming house, 2.5 baths, 2 kitchens. Not illegal. I'm not recommending that. It's what I did. I also kind of insulated the garage and had fireplace put in for heat and rented that out to someone who was storing printers for a printer repair business. So I had like 11 tenants in this bungalow.
That's crazy.
And
Now, why did you do that? Was that just more out of affordability, or was that just something that you maybe had seen or heard, like, hey, this is a good idea to do this? Or as you kept adding rooms, you're like, oh my, look like more money I'm making.
well, I mean, from the beginning, I planned on making it into the 10 rooms, I guess, but it was just, I was thinking, if I rent this to I don't know what it would have rented for as a single family home at the time. Trying to think back, this was 2007. I don't know, $1,500 or something, but in theory, I have 10 rooms, average rent, just under $400 a room at the time, plus the garage rented. So I was probably supposed to get something like $4,300 a month or something on the whole house instead of $1,500. And yes, I have to pay utilities, but in theory, it sounded way better. And I learned a ton of lessons, not the least of which is that theoretical rent isn't the same as actual rent. I had constant problems with tenants not paying. Someone would, when you're renting rooms, especially not to students, this wasn't with rental guarantors. Some of them were students, but a lot of others were people working and just needed an affordable place to live. And the result was, someone would lose their job. They wouldn't be able to pay me for a while. Then they'd get another job, but they'd still fall further behind and things like that. So I had a lot of sob stories and a lot of tenants, and I was much too nice managing this place. Right. So I learned a lot of lessons about being nice to people and having managed personalities. And yeah, I mean, the end result was I don't know how much I collected in rent compared to it, but I definitely probably had like 20% bad debt and vacancy rate, when you add it all up.
Right.
A combination of maybe not the best management, but also very, very hard to manage. And, so.
But you know what I liked about that story though, Luke, is that, you jumped into it and you learned. That's kind of how I did it as well too. And, it's not fun to go through, but the lessons you learn from it, understanding how landlord and tenant board works, if you end up going through that, or the N4 and the L1, the whole process is such a good way to learn when you get into this, because it's not an easy game. But once you understand it and you can put these systems and processes in place, it can definitely make it a great victory for yourself and also for your tenants as well too, right?
Yeah. Well, and it to this day affects how I look at what properties I want to buy, because there are some properties in small towns with high unemployment rates, that are cut up buildings that are poorly done into a bunch of different units. And I look at that and I see the same thing as my first house, which is it's going to be a lot of problems. You're going to have kind of tenants who are going to have problems in life and they're not going to be able to consistently pay you. And I'd rather buy properties that can be higher quality and attract a higher quality tenant. And I know I'm going to have a lot fewer problems. And the other side of this was, I mean, I maybe broke even, maybe made a little bit in the rent over the 4 years I owned it. I made a lot of money on the sale, in part because I guess I had renovated the property, but also because real estate's very forgiving. And kind of as an opposite to what's happening today, when I bought in 2007, I believe prime was 6%, something like that. Yeah. And I prime minus 0.75. During the time I owned it, and I had a mortgage with RBC, prime dropped substantially. But the way RBC had theirs set up, my payments didn't change. So I had a 25-year mortgage, and after 4 years, I had 11 years left in it.
Wow.
Because so much was being paid down, because I was paying, $1,900 and something a month. But as rates dropped, I probably should have been paying, $1,200 or something like that. So there's a huge amount of pay down on it as well. Right. So that was nice. And I was able to kind of take that first property when I sold it. I was then able to buy another condo townhouse that I lived in the basement, rented out the rest of it, and bought another condo townhouse with my best friend. And then later I was able, with two good friends, buy a bungalow this was 2013, 2012 or 2013. I bought a bungalow in Aurelia and I converted that to a legal duplex. I even had to go to the Ontario Municipal Board to fight that because the neighbors didn't want it to be a duplex, and the meter was the lot was 1 meter not wide enough. So ended up, went to the committee of adjustment, got rejected, had to take it to the Ontario Municipal Board, got approved, and I was able to do a full legal duplex conversion at the time for $55,000, including widening the driveway and all of that. And nowadays that's a $200,000 reno. But
you know what's interesting about that story? Just to jump in there is that so you went through the committee of adjustment, so you actually appealed it. A lot of people get nervous when it comes to that. How old were you at that time doing that?
2013. So was it 24? Believe me, I didn't know what I was doing.
Right. But you knew enough, though, that you wanted to see if you could get that overturned in your favor.
Yes. And you know what? A good story about it was the committee of adjustment in Aurelia at the time, and probably still today, was a committee of volunteers. Of course, there's these older neighbors, the street was mostly older people in their retirement age. They're like, we don't want a bunch of people here. We don't want a bunch of students, even though it ended up being, rented to 2 families. And the committee of adjustment wanted to appease them instead of, this young guy, me. So they denied it. Well, the city staff, the senior planner for the city of Aurelia, had written a favorable report to the committee of adjustment saying, we believe this is minor in nature. It's in line with the official, provincial policy statements. And the official plan, this should be approved. Committee of adjustment denied it anyways. So when I went to the committee of adjustment, to the Ontario Municipal Board, I sent a summons, and I don't know how I figured this out. I got lucky. I sent a summons to the senior planner for the city of Aurelia that basically required him by law to come to the Ontario Municipal Board hearing and read his report saying, so the senior planner for the city of Aurelia is saying Aurelia should have approved this.
Wow.
And so they didn't even send anyone to defend it because they would have had to say their own senior planner was wrong.
Right. That's amazing. That's an
I got
amazing
lucky in a lot of
story.
ways, but I also shouldn't have been denied in the first place. So yeah.
Right. And just to understand it, is it because at that time was there a provincial mandate to allow these to go through, and then obviously it goes down to each municipality on how they interpret it?
Yes, and so technically, like I said, duplexes were allowed basically on all detached houses at the time, or basement apartment, legal basement apartments, however you want to set it up. Aurelia defined it as one above the other, but. They were, cities are allowed to set in their bylaws what kind of lot requirements there are. So my lot was, I forget, instead of, 13 meters, it was 12 or something like that in width, right. But it was much deeper than required. So I had more than required lot area. Everything else was set up perfectly for it. But so they were technically allowed to deny it because of that. But I guess the point of a minor variance is that it is minor in nature and it still follows the intention of what the official plan designates, which was they want more intensification. And actually, I spoke to the planners after that for the city of Aurelia, and they said that decision showed the committee of adjustment for Aurelia, the committee of adjustment, that they should be approving these if there isn't a significant reason not to. Basically, the province wants more housing. They will overturn your decision if you're blocking housing on stupid reasons.
You know what? And I like that story because especially now with the way things are going, this is something to show people not to be scared of a property that doesn't fit the requirement. However, as long as you're going out with somebody that has a bit of knowledge or a good realtor to say, hey, look, yes, it doesn't fit it, but lot size wise, but we couldn't apply for a minor variance, where it shouldn't scare people, because especially now that it's being mandated at the provincial level, especially with even like Bill 23 coming through, I love that story, and it's good for people to hear this.
And I will say, one of the fears is obviously the timeline. I will say that what we did in this case was, I was at the time, I guess, just starting law school or in law school, and I knew I was going to be busy through the school year. I was hoping to get the renovation done in the summer. So when we first got denied, what we did was we knew we were going to appeal it. And I was kind of the active partner in this, so to speak, though I also put money in with my friends. But what we did at the time was we rented out the house, and we said, you can have the whole house, but in the lease, it says when we are allowed to discount your rent by $200 and take over the basement. So basically, I forget what we were getting, like $1,700, $1,680, something like that. We can take over the basement, and now you're paying $1,480 for the upstairs. So we pre-planned, we rented it out, but we pre-planned that it may not be kind of a long-term thing. And it worked out in that, when we told them, hey, we want to take over the basement, they said, okay, well, we're going to move out then and find somewhere else. And that was about a year in, that was at the end of their 1-year lease. So it worked out. And I'll say the numbers on this. At the time, obviously very different numbers. We paid $219 for the house, spent about $55 in reno, again, a year later, rented out the upstairs I believe for $1,450 and the downstairs for $1,270. The total was $2,720. So I don't know if that math makes sense, but the total was $2,720.
Right.
And on a, we were about 275 into it. So
right.
It was, the numbers were great. Now that's probably a $750,000 duplex that I don't own anymore, but yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, yeah, cash flow, you're probably close to 1,000, if not over.
Well, another lesson I learned from this, I've learned a lot of lessons. Sometimes I've learned the same lesson multiple times, but in this case, I was on title with my partners. All three of us were on title. And at the end of the duplex conversion, they had both gone and bought expensive homes in Toronto. And they were friends I knew from school who hadn't, who had finished undergrad in business, and one of them was working in finance and one was working in accounting. They'd went and bought expensive homes for themselves. I was a student. They had a lot more debt. We were with a B lender, and we couldn't refinance out of it into an A lender to kind of burr it and get our capital back out.
Right.
So, we ended up just leaving the debt we had on it, and it cash flowed $1,000 a month. But we ended up just we had to leave the debt we had on it, which kind of ties up capital.
So your story,
I would say,
yeah, go ahead.
Get one person on title and then have an agreement about ownership. Don't put multiple people on title and on the mortgage together, because when I went to try to buy something later, the lenders were looking at, I only get 1/3 of the income, but for the debt coverage ratio, they made me 100% responsible for the debt. So it really affected my ability to borrow.
Yeah. And that's another good point as well, too, is when you're doing joint ventures like that, right? Like, yeah, just if only one person can qualify, don't put all three names on it, right? You just have that joint venture agreement on the side where Absolutely. They still have ownership of the property. Yeah, that's a good point. So you started off essentially as a real estate investor. Then from there, you got into wholesaling. Yes. Let's talk about that transition. And I really want to dive into wholesaling because I haven't done a podcast on wholesaling in a little while. And I've had a lot of people ask me about it over the years. And so I want to know your story because honestly, I think you're probably one of the biggest ones in Ontario. Maybe even we'd say even Canada. I don't know, but I see you everywhere.
Yeah. So what happened actually was, long story. I went to law school basically thinking I'd become a real estate investor on the side because I thought you couldn't do it as a full-time job. So I went to law school to become a real estate investor, which is a terrible reason to become a lawyer. And I didn't really enjoy law. So, but I finished law school, got called to the bar, and immediately left to start flipping houses full-time. So I didn't start with wholesaling. I didn't realize you could wholesale. Initially, I was buying off the MLS, which I still do sometimes. There's still deals on the MLS to flip. And so I was flipping houses, and it's something like 17 houses I bought in the first year or something like that. But I was running around, about a year into this full time, I was running around with, I think I was 5 or 6 renos going on at the same time. And I was the only, I was self-managing all of this. I was running around all the properties, paying contractors, didn't have the best systems for paying contractors. So I'm showing up, whenever they want with checks in hand, that kind of stuff. And, I almost didn't go see another house because I just started doing some online marketing for leads, and I got a lead from a seller, and it seemed like a good lead, and I almost didn't go see it because I had too many renos going on at the same time. I'm like, I'm too busy. I don't want another house. But I ended up going to see it anyways. I got it under contract at a very good price, and I was randomly talking to another person, marketing privately, and he said, "Well, I'd be interested in that." And this person's actually a realtor as well. Really good guy, still a friend to this day. And basically, part of the flipping was a lot of my flips I was doing with an investor's money as capital for the down payment and reno money, and then I'd be getting a private mortgage. So I had high costs on my flips. I was paying kind of GCs. I was trying to keep construction costs down, but it's not like I was on site managing it every day. I had too many on the go. So I was kind of paying GCs. I was obviously paying, my own realtor on the sale and the buyer side. I was paying private financing, like Mix Mortgage Investment Corporation privates for the purchase amount, 80% loan to value ish. I was giving up, half the profits in equity. So I had so basically my way of making money on my flips was just buying well enough. That was where my strength was. I was getting a good buy and then would make it pretty and sell it. What I realized selling to this person was I ended up making more money on the wholesale And he made more money than I would have made flipping it, because I was able to wholesale. So basically, I showed it to him. A week later, he signed it. He got it under contract from me. I signed the contract to him, and he was going to pay me a fee. It closed months later. We had a long closing, but then he was able to buy it in cash using a line of credit on his primary. So his interest rate was like 3% instead of mine being 2 or 3% in fees with 12% interest, right? He obviously didn't have an equity partner, so all the profits went to him. He was actually a licensed realtor, so depending on how you want to pay yourself, but essentially he's saving on that side as well. And him and his father were actively involved in the renovations. They were hiring kind of less expensive people and able to manage them closely on site. So when you take all of those things together, he saved $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 more than I would have on this project when you add everything up. And he was able to make that extra in profit. So he was able to pay me more and make more money than what I would have made. And so I realized my strength was really in the buy at the time. And other people had strengths elsewhere, and I should let them use their strengths to make their money in that way. But then because I'm so good at the buy, I can make money on the buy.
And when you're saying that you're really good at the buy, what do you mean by that? You talking about being able to negotiate well? Are you talking about finding deals well? And where are you finding them? I know you said online, but how are you doing this? How are you putting it all together?
Yeah. So, I mean, some of them are even, like I said, MLS deals. Part of it is creating a big funnel and filtering and putting the work in to go through a lot of leads. So, I mean, if you're doing MLS offers, it's looking at everything. Some of my first MLS offers were things that were cross-listed on different boards incorrectly. And, so it's not getting the attention it should have, even though it was underpriced. Or properties I realized were, depending on this depends on the city, but like one I did in Brampton was, MPAC said it was a 4-bedroom, but they had opened up a wall to make it a 3-bedroom. But in that area, 4 bedrooms sold for a lot more than 3 bedrooms. So that one was pretty easy. I bought it on the MLS, made it prettier, put a new kitchen in, but I also put a wall back up, and it was already a 4-bedroom. It was just being sold as a 3-bedroom previously. So I sold it as a 4-bedroom and was able to make a good amount of extra money there. So it's negotiating well, but also buying at a deeper discount, and that being finding them a lot of the time privately. So we market to a lot of people who are often embarrassed to go on the MLS, things like hoarders. I just sold a house conditionally yesterday with the dog. They just let their dogs do their business inside the house for years. I mean, we had to replace the subfloor. The stench we put so much work into there to getting the stench out. And I think we're going to make good money on that one. And
that's a good point right there, is that, some people would probably ask the question, why would somebody want to use a wholesaler? Because if I put it on MLS, I'm going to get a lot more eyeballs on it. So I'll probably get more money. But I think you hit on something that's important, is that they might be embarrassed, or they may be like, I don't want anybody coming in here and seeing my home. And you probably now in your negotiations, what are you saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, we try to match the energy of the seller in the way that we're not judging them. So, this is their family home. They've raised their family here. And whether it's mental health issues, financial issues, they've fallen behind. They haven't been able to maintain it. They haven't been able to take care of it. They maybe had the best intentions for it. So we're treating them with kindness and respect there. On the other side of it, if they had a tenant destroy their house and they're like, oh, these horrible people destroyed my house and it looks terrible. We're like, yeah, it looks terrible. Absolutely.
Right.
But on the other side of it, we're not trashing people's homes where they raise their families. It's, obviously, there's going to be some work here, and we're going to have to make it prettier. It's a solid house with good bones. And we can take this and bring it back to the standard that people are going to expect on the MLS and make it pretty for the next family to move in. So it's approaching with kindness, and there's lots of reasons. Embarrassment is one, definitely for hoarders and things like that. Some of it is, so what we're looking for with sellers is distress, but we're looking for a combination often of seller distress and property distress. So when we have seller distress, might be they don't have the money to take care of it. There's kind of a bit of a hoarding issue. Maybe someone passed away in the family and they inherited it, or there's emotional attachment to things in the house. That might be seller distress. The other side of it is property distress, where obviously it's full of stuff. The roof's been leaking for years. The dog's been doing their business on the floor, or it's just, they've been smoking in the house, or it's original to 1965 and they've never changed the carpet. The property is in distress. Now we are able to do deals when there's one or the other, but it's much harder to do when there's one or the other. the property's in distress, but the person has the time, the ability, and the money to take care of renovating it and bringing it up to a different standard, and they're not in a hurry to sell, then they can take care of it and they don't necessarily need us. And then the other side of it, where the property's mint, but the seller is in distress, we're not as needed. But you might have a property in great shape, but they buried their head in the sand about being behind on their mortgage payments, and the sheriff's coming to kick them out next week, and they need a really quick sale.
Right.
So those are situations where we've come in to help, and everything down to we've given sellers, we paid first and last for them to be able to move to a new rental. We've lent them money. In the past, we've registered it as a mortgage on title, where they now have money to take and so it can be released to them before closing. They can now go put a deposit down and a down payment to buy their next house. So they might have equity in their home, but they have no cash for moving, for deposit, down payment for the next home. So we're able to kind of front those things. So we're able to do things that are alternatives to what realtors offer. And again, it's a big funnel. So we get a lot of people in and we go, why don't you sell with a realtor? It sounds like your situation's better. You should call a realtor and sell with a realtor. Because if their main focus is getting the most money possible, they're going to do that with a realtor. 100%. Get it on the MLS, you're going to make the most money. But sometimes 1% of the people, the most money isn't their main focus. And that's where we come in.
And I like that, because essentially what you're doing is you're listening to each person's story, and then you're putting them in the correct path to satisfy the needs that they have. And I think that's incredibly important. You're essentially creating a win-win. And that's how it should always be done. As opposed to, I think sometimes people look at it from the outside and not fully understand it and say, oh, well, you're taking advantage of them, which is not the case. You're actually assisting them in the situation that they're in and providing them with a solution.
Yeah. A lot of the people who say we take advantage of them wouldn't deal with the things we deal with. Right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, even just down to, hey, we'll close on the house. This is our price, but you can leave whatever you want.
Right. Yeah.
So we might take a full hoarder house or just some of their inherited junk. They take anything of value and they leave all the rest, and we deal with it.
Right. Yeah. They're just kind of washing their hands clean and like, thank you. I was thinking about how am I going to deal with all this, and you've now helped me. Thank you very much, Luc. And
I see it as what we end up making is often almost like paying for a service. It's not as direct because we're the one paying them for the house, but there's a value to services, there's a value to what you're willing to pay for a service. And that value for us, we're being paid through a discount on the property. And if we don't provide enough value, then we're not going to get enough of a discount. But if the person buying our service sees enough value in what we offer, then they're going to accept, the discount we're looking for.
Now, are you doing the infamous yellow letters? Do you go around neighborhoods? Do you have anybody that's doing that, or are you strictly now just online?
No, we do a mix of everything. I don't like relying on any one marketing channel. For context, our peak year, we bought 261 houses. We bought and sold about 800 houses to date. And I think we are the largest in Canada. We're across Ontario. We do a bit in Quebec as well, like Montreal. And then we're also in Vancouver. We flip and wholesale out in Vancouver as well. And really all of, I guess, Metro Vancouver really, and on the island, Vancouver Island. For us to consistently get enough volume, often marketing channels we find ebb and flow. For example, there's times when Google AdWords will be our most consistent and best lead channel. It's often higher quality leads too, because when you have Google AdWords leads, it's people who are searching, sell my house fast for cash.
Right.
Well, if they're searching for that, they're looking for you, and that's going to be a higher quality lead, even though it's going to be a more expensive lead versus yellow letters, which we do, like handwritten looking letters. It's a much lower quality lead because people say, well, you contacted me, you're the one making an offer to me kind of thing. What do you want?
Right.
What do you want to pay? And so you just have a lot of people looking for top dollar. And so it's, again, much more of a funnel or a filtering system.
And I'm sure with that yellow letter too, you're probably getting people calling you angry. You must, right? Because you're like, what do you think? You think I'm desperate?
Yeah. Well, the funniest thing is the people who are yelling at us and say they're going to call the police if we trespass again. We're just like, Canada Post delivered these. We didn't trespass on your property. But we also...
So you're hand delivering them?
No, we're not. No. Canada Post delivers them.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is people think we're hand delivering them and coming onto their property and they're, threatening us if we come on their property again.
Right.
Not the case. But the other thing is, people in nice neighborhoods sometimes get really upset. Though. Nobody around here would ever sell with us. And then we buy houses in nice neighborhoods where the neighbors don't realize that. We had one house in a nice kind of up and came area, kind of a little more of a hipster area in Ottawa. They hadn't had running water in the house for 5 years.
What?
We told the story. I won't show pictures because it is graphic. So there was a bit of a hoarding situation when we emptied it. It was very much like teenage boy stuff, toddler stuff, baby stuff, like piled, and they just walked over this garbage for 15 years. But what had happened was 5 years prior, there was a back addition on the house and the roof had collapsed and there was a bathroom in there and broken the plumbing lines. And they didn't know how to cap the plumbing lines. So they shut water off to the house. And with no water, they couldn't flush the toilet. So they started using the bathtub as a toilet. But it corroded the drains of the bathtub and started dripping into their kitchen. So they plugged it. And so when we bought this house for one, the bathtub was filled to the brim with what looked like a mud spa bath, but it wasn't. And then after they couldn't use the bathtub anymore, they started using their water jugs as a toilet and then throwing them in the collapsed back addition. So there was 60 or 70 water jugs full of urine and feces. And they called us because they were so, I think it was property taxes or something. They were so, no, the lender. They basically said the lender's coming in 5 days. The sheriff is coming in 5 days to kick us out. And we have equity in this house. Can you buy our house? And we closed in 3 days and then gave them 45 days to find a rental. So they were able to stay in the house for 45 days. Then they because they got the money at the closing. We had a holdback, but they got their money at the closing, the rest of it. And they were able to have the funds to move. And then, but we owned it for the 45-day period. Then they moved. And then we were able to clear out the house and list it on the MLS. And this, again, very nice area of Ottawa. The neighbors would probably call us yelling, saying, no way anyone would live like that. And no way anyone here would want to sell their house. But they did. This house ended up we sold it on the MLS. Someone tore it down and built 2 beautiful houses in its place that are finished.
Yeah, I mean, how do you even salvage something like that? How do you even live in something like that? I couldn't even imagine. Like the smell. Did you go in? Do you actually go into that house? Did you have to wear a mask? You had to wear a mask.
I didn't wear a mask, but I wasn't in there long.
That is incredible.
Yeah. I'm glad.
That might be the most disgusting story I think I've ever heard. Luke,
the pictures. You don't need to see them. Let's just say.
Yeah, no. I don't need to. That is wild. But man, I don't even know. I don't even know if we should even continue this podcast. I don't even know where to take it after that. Well, that's something more exciting to talk about now.
We can talk about the transition a little bit because part of wholesaling that's necessary is having sellers and buyers, right? And with the way the market changed, investors have pulled back heavily.
Yes,
especially last year, and through summer and into 2022. We're recording this in July of 2023. So we've seen investors coming back a little bit more recently, but investors had pulled back heavily through last year. And what we found was, even I think for me, my experience in most of the markets we're in, the kind of lowest point in the market was kind of around August, September of 2022. Yep. It was kind of really when things stalled out. Sales volume were at the lowest. Toronto, from what I recall, and you probably know the stats, but sales volume was something like 55% of the year before. So it had gone down 45% year over year. That's volume, not price. What that said to me was there's still 55% of the buyers buying. And for the most part, it's retail buyers, people who want an end product because they need to move. People need to move. They want to buy a house. They want somewhere to live. And so that made a transition for us where, we had gone from flipping initially to really scaling a wholesale business with 35 employees to transitioning back where we still try to wholesale properties, but when we can't assign them, if it's a property that would work for us as a flip, we're taking them on and flipping them. So we have something like 20 flips on the go right now. We've been doing well with our flips, and it's definitely a little bit of a different skill set on the renovation side than what we've had to do as a company for a while. But we're much better flippers than I was at the beginning. It's not just me managing them now.
And what is it, would you say, is different now in the market that you're in for flipping? Because a lot of people would take a look at the market that we're in and say, well, flipping is risky. However, you went full into it, but you obviously did something with the flips that were slightly different because you saw that there were still retailers than as opposed to investors. So does that flip look different? Are there certain rooms that you focus more on?
Yeah. So part of it depends on the house we're starting with. And so that's a little bit of a art more than it is just a science. But part of the reason for doing it is when you have at the peak of the market, the investor grade product, the fixer upper product on the MLS was selling for almost as much as the finished product. Like it didn't make sense, right? Because I don't know, people were excited to try to flip houses. So they wanted something that needed work. What's changed is now that fixer upper product is now selling at a reasonable discount from the fixed up product. And there's actually less of the fixed up product on the market because fewer investors are flipping. So you can actually get a little bit more of a premium for the fixed up product, and you can get a little bit more of a discount for the unrenovated product, so that's a nice balance.
That's a good point too, because that's exactly what we're seeing as well. If it's a nice home and it's done well, they're moving quickly. Yes. And the ones that are not, they're getting more of a discounted price. So yeah, that's very accurate.
Yep. And so in terms of what we do to the house, it does a little bit depend on what the house needs. If the kitchen is a little bit older, but in very good shape and it matches the rest of the house, we'll try to not go overboard and do everything. We often a little bit over renovate more than we should, I find. But, we're buying, for example, vinyl plank flooring in bulk. So, we're getting kind of clearance product. The last batch, we bought 13,000 square feet of it and, we store it and then we have it. But I think we paid $1.59 a square foot for a high quality 7-inch wide vinyl plank product. I think 5 mil thickness. So it's a nice flooring, but we're able to get that, under $1.60 a foot. And so, that's kind of where we're saving. So, and then we have, especially in the Ottawa area where a lot of our flips are, we have crews that are able to, for example, install flooring quite inexpensively. And so we're able to do things like that can transform a space, pulling out all this gross old carpet that smells, throw down vinyl plank flooring throughout, and it just looks, and paint everything and do light fixtures. So those are my kind of where we, depending on what the house starts with, my main things are flooring, paint, lighting. Lighting is a key one that people miss. I don't like too white lighting. I don't like too yellow lighting. I want it to be LED and I want it to be bright enough because everything looks better with bright lighting, but not glaring hospital lighting. Bright, warm, warm enough middle tone lighting. So lighting is super important. Flooring and paint makes a huge difference. And then, the rest of it depends on what you're starting with. Obviously, if you have a bathroom vanity that's all rotted out, the wood damaged, fine, we have to change that. But if it looks decent, just a little older, and it cleans up nice, we'll keep that. We don't want to over renovate, and then it's a matter of matching it. If we have to put in a new kitchen, then maybe we're going to want a little more new in the bathroom so it matches. But if the kitchen's decent and the bathroom's decent, they were renovated 15 years ago and they've been well maintained, or even 20 years ago, they've been well maintained, we're keeping those. And we don't want to over renovate.
Right.
And then we stage everything as well. So we were asking certain rooms. Yep. I typically stage the main living areas, the bathrooms, and the primary bedroom only. So I stage kind of those things.
Now, what would you say in regards to percentage of what your business is doing now, flipping or wholesaling?
About 50-50, where it was about 95-5 for a while there.
Okay, so you had to make a quick switch then. And that switch happened when, would we say around that August timeframe last year or even earlier?
August was when we, I guess, took on that first one. We actually have bought flips from other wholesalers as well. We saw other investors and flippers kind of pull back. We said, well, we're not getting good offers on our flips, our flip potential properties. I wonder if the other wholesalers are. And so we, there's one wholesaler, I think we bought 5 properties from them since last summer. So if we see an opportunity, we're going to buy it. And like I said, I bought a few off the MLS as well that we're going to make money on. We have made money on. So I think that's something he had to do to adapt. But we needed a bigger discount from our sellers than we would have before. And as a result, we were getting less volume ourselves. But it was kind of adapt to the flips or have to let go of a bunch of our employees. And we have a really good team and a lot of loyalty with our employees. And we didn't want to kind of ruin that loyalty by having to let a bunch of people go. So as long as we're able to support it, The flips are just we're just flipping to stay in the black until the market recovers. So we make money, make good money on our flips, but we have a lot of overhead to cover.
Right. Okay. No, that's good to know. So I'm going to kind of slide back into wholesale a little bit here, just for people who want to learn more about it. So when you say you have it under contract, are you just using like a typical ARIA form?
Yes. In Ontario, we use the typical ARIA form. We add clauses that say it's assignable. Technically, all contracts in Ontario can be assigned as of right, unless it's specified in the contract that they aren't. However, you'll get pushback from other lawyers and things like that if you don't say it's assignable. And our assignment clause says typically that we're relieved of liability upon assignment. So there's that. And then
now, when you say assignable, now are you just putting your name or the corporation and or assignees, or are you putting a clause in the Schedule A?
We're putting a clause in the Schedule A. We don't put it in the name. Part of that is putting and or assignees wouldn't technically relieve of liability once it's assigned. Or it's more of a gray area. So if we just do that, but if we add a clause that says we are allowed to assign this contract to any person or entity that we decide, and upon assignment, we will be relieved of all liability under this contract. We therefore, let's say if our buyer doesn't perform, the seller technically can't come after us or wouldn't win in a lawsuit and stuff. So it protects us there. And then the other side of it is most of our contracts most of the time, we buy it conditionally. So we typically have kind of a due diligence clause or a version of that gives us a certain amount of time to do due diligence on the property. And when that is the case, we can typically assign it during that period. And so if we don't find an assignee, or we look at it in more detail, or just the acquisition rep was wrong on their numbers, we can decide to not waive the condition and let the contract expire.
Right. And how long are you typically putting these deals under contract for? A couple months?
Usually 10 business days, anywhere from kind of 7 to 15 business days.
Okay. And that includes you trying to, and now are you also being transparent and saying, look, you know what, I may not be buying this property, but I do have a group of investors. How are you wording that to them?
Typically we approach it as, so it gets put on the acquisition reps put it on me, essentially. My boss is going to look at it and decide, if this is something that's going to fit our company as a flip or a rental. Sometimes also, if it doesn't suit us, we have a lot of investors we work with in our network that may want to take the contract over. So we're not necessarily saying, hey, we're looking to assign this first. And it depends on the property, because sometimes we are looking to flip it first, but we are also, we kind of let them know that it may be someone else. And a lot of it comes down to just the way you approach it and the way you tell them about it.
Right. Before we move on to the next topic here, what would you say is some of the biggest mistakes that, say, somebody that wants to get into wholesaling, what they need to be aware of before they start it, right? Because obviously there's the whole website that you've got to create and the marketing campaign. What do they got to be aware of, and where you see the wholesalers that are coming into the game making their biggest mistakes?
I guess the biggest mistake is usually just overpaying for properties, or trying to convince yourself that it's worth more than it is because you want it to be. This was something I experienced when I started wholesaling. Again, I was flipping, and there was I really only knew of a couple wholesalers that did any volume at all. There was Aaron Moore, who had been doing it for a long time, with consistent volume, and he was flipping himself. And then there was also Michael Chow, who was, kind of scaling up to try to do more volume as well. So they were the ones that were doing it. But my experience was, when I was trying to add people to my buyers list, I'd often get, I was on someone's wholesale list, and, did another real estate course come through town, and, one of those rich dad programs or something. And then, you think you can wholesale, because the experience a lot of people had, and I don't mean this with Aaron Moore or Michael Chow, but with other wannabe wholesalers, was they would build a buyer's list, and then they'd go get something under contract that's listed on the MLS for $300,000, and they'd go buy it for $295,000, and then they'd go ask $305,000 from their buyers. Their buyers are saying, I could have bought that on the MLS for $300,000. Or $295,000. Why am I paying you anything? This isn't a good deal. It's not like you seized some opportunity that nobody else saw. You basically just bought something at market value on the MLS, and now you're trying to ask a premium for it. So that quickly turns off your buyers. And that was actually when I started. One of the difficulties I had in building my buyers list was people would say, I've gotten too many shitty deals from people. I don't even want to get on your list. So it's important that, when you're like, we'll sometimes, Katarina on my team, she sells most of my properties, and she's awesome. She does what we call dispositions. If one of our sales reps overpays for a property, she finds like, hey, this isn't enough of a discount, she won't send it out to our list.
Right.
She tries to protect the integrity of our list. She wants us to have good deals because it'll turn people off of wanting to buy from us if we're sending out bad deals. So the number one thing you can do as a new wholesaler is make sure you're getting appropriate discounts. And I know that's hard to do, but make sure you're getting appropriate discounts. And the website, all of that doesn't necessarily come back to it. You can go knock on a door and say, hey, look, I work for a house flipper. Do you know anyone in the area who might be in a position where they could sell their house to a house flipper? You don't need a website or any of that to be a house flipper, right?
And how are they determining if it's a good deal? Are they using Zillow? Are they using a realtor in the area? How do they know?
Well, that's one of the difficulties for sure. For me, it helped because first I had rentals, and then I had I flipped. So I knew the numbers I needed to make flips work. And that helped a lot. When you're starting off in wholesaling, it's a big learning curve. People think wholesaling is like the first thing to do because in theory, you don't need much capital to do it. But it has a steep learning curve because you can get lucky. If you don't know what you're doing, you might get an amazing deal and then way undersell it because you don't know what it's worth. And if you way overpay for properties, then you're turning away your buyers and you're not going to be able to, keep a strong buyers list and have people interested. So, but it's just a matter, in my opinion, of taking time to look at a lot of properties. So, in the GTA, really most of Ontario, House Sigma is an excellent tool. It's free. It's actually what I use now majority of the time for running comps because it's super easy to use. And you can see what's sold in the past, 90 days. And then you look at pictures to compare it to the product you have. And you're trying to compare the sale price to the condition. But comping is a bit of an art and a bit of science. And it's a very, very useful skill. I think if you're able to master getting comparable properties, I think that's an excellent tool. For someone just starting out, even getting leads for investors, something like door knocking or putting up bandit signs, which are kind of those signs you see on the side of the street called bandit signs because I don't think they're really allowed. That's why we don't do them. But put up the sign on the side of the street that says we buy houses and a phone number. People might call you. So if you're able to get those leads, you go through the house, you take pictures, you try to get an idea from the seller what price they want. And then you go to another wholesaler like us. We work with people like that. Or, an experienced realtor who has investor clients, maybe someone like you, or and say, hey, here's all the details on the property. The seller wants $400,000. What do you think? At what price would you have a client interested in this property? And if they bring that to you, Gary, you might say, you know what? I know someone who's going to buy that at $420,000 and still be willing to maybe pay me a commission somewhere in there or whatever, right? Or realtors, if you bring something to a realtor, expect you should be paying them a commission. That's how it works. They deserve something for their time and their relationship with their clients. But yeah, there's lots of people you can go to. The idea is find sellers who are motivated, get details on the property and the price they want, and then bring that to somebody who can give you advice, and then try to learn on how they came to those values, because that's going to help you know how to analyze the next one.
Yeah, listen, and I'm glad you said that in regards to that. There is a steep learning curve in wholesaling. And I think there is this belief that it's easy and it's simple. I'm not saying that you can't do it, but don't go in thinking that this is easy. And like anything else you do, you got to put in 10,000 hours. There's no easy road to success. There's just, I've looked really hard and I haven't found one yet. Right. So you just got to put the time in, you got to put the hour in. So I'm glad you said that. But listen, I've done wholesaling and it's great. It's a great way to learn what it is that you're doing and understand real estate, and whether it be rental, like there's so many different ways of doing this, but you just have to get involved. And unfortunately, you're going to sometimes make some mistakes, but that's where you learn the most.
Yes.
Right. So let's move on to your 24 unit, so not only are you a real estate investor and have done 2-unit conversions and wholesaling and flipping, you're also into multifamily as well too. And it sounds like you got a fairly significant portfolio as well.
Yeah. Jess and I have about 100 units together across Ontario. So
Amazing.
In about 30 something properties. So we have a few multifamily properties and then, a bunch of singles and duplexes and things like that, and a few Airbnbs mixed in there. So yeah, I want to tell you about my favorite one that I bought last summer. So rates had already started changing and I was worried about that. It's funny. We were driving through the town of Brockville where we have a rental on one of the main streets. We were probably going to Toronto, passing through Brockville. Oh, let's just drive by, that single family house we have as a rental, see how it looks, keep an eye on it. So we drive by, and then right around the corner from it, there's this beautiful building, U-shaped with a courtyard in the middle. And we kind of both look at it and go, wow, I'd love to own that one day. A week later, our commercial team lead messaged us saying, hey, have you seen this property on the market in Brockville? It's that property.
No way.
And they were asking $3 million. It's 24 units. 2.99. They're asking $3 million. 24 units. All of them are 2 bedrooms, except for one that's a 1 bedroom because the laundry area and stuff. And poured concrete between all the floors. No elevators. They just put a brand new roof on it. The windows are old. Those will have to be done. We haven't done them yet. Boiler system for heat. Tenants pay their own water and hydro. But they've owned it 30 years. They have no mortgage on it, sellers. And the average rents were about $750 a month for 2-bedroom units in Brockville.
Wow.
Which renovated market rents are kind of in the $1,550 to $1,700 range. $1,550 when we were looking last summer.
Yeah. So these tenants aren't going anywhere, or they definitely don't want to.
No. So what we did though, we really liked the building, but obviously they had a lot of interest at that price, and they got 9 offers, including ours. They kind of set an offer day because they had so much interest. That went to see a couple units in it. They had 9 offers. We offered asking price with traditional financing and a conditional period. And we offered 3.4 million, so 400,000 above asking, with seller financing. And I'll get into the details after, but they accepted another offer. And then that person didn't bring their deposit. They flaked. So the sellers called us back and said, you are our second choice. You're still interested. We want the offer with the seller financing where you're paying 400,000 above asking.
Yeah.
And the way we structured it, and we had to go back and forth a little bit, but we settled on $550,000 down, which was 16% of the purchase price. So we're 84% loan to value. 5 years interest only payments at 4% interest only for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, and it's fully open, at the end of 5 years, we have the option to renew our option, another 5 years at 6% interest only payments for another 5 years. So we have 10 years of interest only payments on this property, which gives us plenty of time to slowly turn over units, which yes, will take more capital because we're not doing a BRRRR. The current NOI is approximately what the interest payments are, or at the time of purchase, they're approximately what the 4% interest only payments are. So basically break even, not making anything, but the potential is there. So we have our first 3 units turning over right now. One's fully renovated and we're likely renting it to another tenant in the building. So, the building had 24 units sharing 1 washer, 1 dryer, coin laundry. All the renovated ones are getting ensuite laundry. They're small kitchens, but we're putting in quartz countertops and new cabinets, new glue down vinyl throughout. So they're getting, renovated. And what we're doing is giving a bit of a discount to existing tenants to play musical chairs. So if they're willing to leave their unit at $750 a month, they'll get a $200 or $300 discount off of market rents, or up to $400 really off of market rents. But it'll be, so basically we're going to be able to get, if we're able to go from $750 to $1350, even though that's not market, it's a $600 lift for renovating a unit. And it's going to make a huge difference because that, if we were break even before, you turn over 1 unit, $600 a month more, that's an extra $7,200 a year on 1 unit.
I like that. That's a great idea. Yeah. And you're increasing your net operating income and you've got 10 years. And so, and some people may say, well, yeah, why would the sellers want to do that? Hey, look, you know what? They're getting some cash flow coming in, right? They don't have to worry about some of the capital gains yet. They're deferring it, right? There's so many great options on both sides, or benefits on both sides. And awesome.
They were basically in their 60s, about to retire kind of thing. Right. And so now they don't have to manage the building anymore because they were kind of self-dealing with it and dealing with repairs and the garbage and all that stuff. They're doing it all themselves. They're getting essentially the same amount of money from what they were getting before, but they don't have to deal with it anymore. And it's kind of giving into their retirement 10 years of guaranteed interest. Or not guaranteed because we could end it sooner, but 10 years of interest if they don't, or lump sum their money back. I think they were very happy with the situation. And part of it was, they were vetting, us as the buyers, making sure we knew what we were doing and had assets to back up and income to back up what we were, that we're not going to default on the payments and things like that. But that gave us, the VTB, the seller financing in this case, is what, and we paid $400,000 more than they're asking, but for us that was worth it, because it helped the cash flow situation so much as we slowly turn it over, and it doesn't give us that rush. And honestly, I find it very difficult, that rush to try to have to push a bunch of tenants out, to try to get rents up, but and you don't want to do it. You don't really want to push tenants out, but at the same time, the numbers don't work without it on most of the buildings right now. So this is a nice mix. And if we're able to kind of move tenants around the building slowly, and I mean, to be fair, a lot of them are older. One of the tenants passed away in the hospital, not in the unit. That's how one of them is vacant. But it's nice to not have to kind of push tenants out. And I think over a 10-year period, we're going to be able to turn over most of the building. Even over 5 years, I think most of the building will be turned over. We'll be up to kind of market rents, or kind of this staggered market rents.
Yeah, and I really like that option too of the musical chairs, right? You clean up one property and you probably do like an open house, or allow these tenants to come through, take a look, and like, what? This is incredible. Of course, I'll move. If they can obviously afford it, but that's a great strategy. And
the ensuite laundry is a huge selling feature for a lot of tenants.
Yeah,
not having to go down to the shared coin laundry is a big benefit.
For sure. And you probably just plug it right into wherever maybe the bathroom is or the kitchen is, right? So it's probably not that different.
There was because each unit has its own water meter and hydrometer. Each unit had like a large closet with its own hot water tank, electric hot water tank for every unit. And so there was room in there to add laundry already.
Really? And so did you go to on demand, or did you just keep the hot water tank?
We were able to keep the hot water tank. The way they're installed, some of them have to be pushed a little bit out of the way, but there's room for both the laundry and the hot water tank in there.
Awesome. Luc, listen, we've spent an hour together already. We're at the end here. I could honestly talk to you for like another hour. This was,
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this podcast. I thought it was really good. Now, speaking of podcasts, you've also got a podcast that you're going to be releasing soon. I think by the time this releases, it'll probably be available. You want to just talk about that a little bit and give a little plug on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've kind of rebranded. I've kind of hidden in the shadows a little bit on social media for the past few years, focus more on my family and things like that. And now I've kind of rebranded. So I go, if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Luc Self Wealth. And the podcast is going to be called the Self Wealth Real Estate Podcast. And, it's similar to you. I plan on interviewing, successful real estate investors. The spin on it that I'm doing is, what I like doing is talking about the best and the worst deals that the investor's ever done, because I think it's always nice hearing the stories of the best deals you've ever done, but you also learn the biggest lessons from the worst deals someone's ever done. So I'm really excited to dig in and have been digging in with real estate investors, kind of their worst deals, because that's always where you learn. So by the time this airs, those will have been released. So look out for the Self Wealth Real Estate Podcast on anywhere you find your podcasts. And in the meantime, follow me on Instagram, Luc Self Wealth. I'd love to have you there.
Awesome. Luc, listen, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your journey and your story and your wealth of knowledge. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much
when you're back in town again, we've got to have lunch or dinner. All right. We got to do that.
Awesome.
Or we got to hang out at the cottage, one or the other.
That sounds great.
Awesome, brother. Listen, I appreciate it again. Take care. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.